Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio. I am Brian Black, and I'm joined with Rob Henderson.
Hello.
On Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. Today, we are finally going to answer some questions, and we've got some really good questions. And before you tune out and say, oh God, a question episode, I don't want to listen, there's really some cool stuff in here, and they're topics that we've been wanting to talk about anyway, so they really kind of field, well, maybe not the coffee question, but anyway, they kind of field into what we're describing here and the philosophy behind gear tasting anyway, so.
Yeah, just gear in general.
Yeah, so let's start off with the first one.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So this is from Isaac on Facebook, and he said, I love your videos. The very first video I ever watched was you doing a how-to on rappelling. My question is, I'm doing some backpacking in July, and I was thinking about buying new pants for the trip, shooting, hunting, and fishing, and I was thinking about tactical pants, 511, true spec, etc. Basically something light and rugged. What pant would you recommend?
So you can go a couple of different ways with that, in my opinion, anyway. Mm-hmm. I like to live by the philosophy that cotton's rotten.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like to use cotton in anything where I'm going to be around a wet environment, or even if it's rain, even if there's water. I mean, you mentioned fishing, or the guy mentioned fishing, yeah. So Isaac did. And I would want something that would dry fast for that kind of environment, as well as hunting too. You never know what you're going to get into with hunting, and I have an overall preference for stuff like that, and it's not going to be the prettiest for people to hear, but it's going to be Arc'teryx leaf pants because of the tweave material that they use to construct those, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they're Arc'teryx, and Arc'teryx makes great stuff. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, I've been using it for years, and that's founded on a lot of different things with me. It's not just because I opened up the package and I rolled around in them in the dirt and walked through some water for a while. Yeah. I've literally been using the same pair of pants that are made out of that tweed material for going on 6 years now. Mm-hmm. And I use them almost all the time when I'm on the range, when I'm doing any kind of activity, whether it's backpacking or climbing. I mean, the things are just bomb-proof. And I throw that term around a lot, bomb-proof. You probably hear that in the industry a lot, and even when it comes to apparel, it's just true, man. I've been through so much with these pants, and they've just lasted forever. So yes, they're pricey. They're probably $300-400 pants, but at the same time, it's like I can't put a price on the amount of use that I've gotten out of them. I really can't. I mean, I've bought a pair of jeans before that was $150, right? And the bottom wears out because I walk in them forever, and the seat craps out. I have to put in, a patch in them or something like that, and I maybe get 2 years out of them.
And I think that's a good example of because the Arc'teryx pants aren't good because they're expensive. Mm-hmm. They're good because they're well made out of good materials, and because they're like that, they are expensive. But like you just said, $150 pair of jeans isn't going to last you any longer than a regular pair of jeans. So that price discrepancy doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I mean, so granted, you could go like the BDU route, like you're talking about true spec and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that he's probably mentioning like a pair of, like 50/50 Nyko BDU pants. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with those. I've worn the hell out of those kind of pants too. Mm-hmm. The problem is when you get into different environments, they are not going to do what you need them to do. If I got a pair of 50/50 Nyko pants wet, they would take forever and a day to dry out. Right. If it was a humid environment, they might not ever dry out, and I'd be suffering through that environment with a pair of pants that I wish I would have had something different for.
I look at the 50/50 Nyko stuff like you can buy a canvas tent still, but there are better materials for tents nowadays. And when you look at the military on the whole, they're still using those BDUs because of the cost. That material isn't necessarily better than the tweave and the stuff like that, but they're not going to pay to re-outfit every single person. So just because it's in use there doesn't make it better. So if you have the option to get polyester or the tweave fabric that you're talking about, it's a better option.
Well, and I don't really like poly stuff just because I don't feel like that dries well either.
Yeah,
so
true. I don't know what that material is called. That, like,
Yeah,
I call it swoosh material because
maybe
it goes
maybe it
swoosh.
is a polyester. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, to just recap some of the terms that we've probably been throwing out, like poly is the way I refer to polyester. 50-50 NICO means that it's half nylon, half cotton, and then cotton is cotton, and then tweave is kind of like a 4-way stretch material that Arc'teryx uses in some of their equipment and their clothing, and then they're not limited. Like Arc'teryx just isn't limited to using tweave too. They've got other fabrics too, but I just really like the tweave material that they use, and there's other manufacturers that make stuff out of.
Well, I was going to say I have a pair of REI pants
Right.
that I don't think it's actually tweave, but it's very similar, and they don't make them anymore. And they were like the trail something pant, and I have done everything I can to keep this pair of pants alive because they're the best. But I've done the patching, I've replaced zippers and stuff like that. But I think they were like $80 or something like that. But they definitely wear faster.
Well, one thing that I would, if I was going to break this down into what I would evaluate clothing on, it would be abrasion resistance. It would be the drying principles that it has in an arid or humid environment, that type of thing. Especially if I'm around a true water environment, and then it would be comfort. It would be stretch, because I like stretch in
Everything.
things that I'm doing activity in. It just makes sense. If
Right.
if you're moving around doing Chuck Norris kicks and pants, you want something that's going to stretch.
I want the action jeans,
Right,
man.
you want the Chuck Norris action pants. Like, yeah. Buy some tweave action pants from Chuck Norris approved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've talked about that.
Yeah.
I feel like and we'll put some stuff in the episode intel, and I've written extensively on tweave material and some reviews that I've done on Arc'teryx stuff. You can kind of read about it there, and we'll link to some products too. Yeah. And I'll try to recommend some stuff that's not at that level, but still kind of has those principles too. So definitely check the show or episode intel for that.
So that kind of bleeds into our next question from Brian on Twitter. Brian with an I.
Which way does he spell his
with
name?
an I. So
Bad.
Incorrect.
Spells it the wrong way.
He says, what's the methodology for testing tactical gear / apparel? What drills and things happen during an ITS range day?
So first, let's address apparel. I think apparel is just time. It's time and environment, really, is what I would qualify that as. Like, I beat up equipment all the time, and what I mean by that is that I'm not afraid to get dirty with it. I'm not afraid to throw it down and see what happens, that type of thing. And those are just principles I have when I'm doing, my evaluation.
Yeah.
I think testing is kind of the wrong way to approach it. I think testing as a whole, the actual word testing, implies that I've got some type of scientific formula that I'm enacting, for a piece of equipment. I would call it more of an evaluation, meaning I'm using it and it's in the way that it should be designed. Maybe I'm torture testing it, and see, there's that word testing again. I would be putting it through the ringer, basically, is what I'd be doing. I mean, that's really what I'm doing when I'm evaluating stuff. So, I didn't write an article on that tweave material or the Arc'teryx stuff for years because I wanted to see what it did. I climbed a couple of 14ers in the pants. Yeah. I went to every class I could in the pants. It's like I don't have this concept that somebody sends us something for evaluation and I've got to write about it within a week or a month or even a year sometimes. It just depends on how long I feel is appropriate to properly evaluate something.
Right.
And that may not be something that, every manufacturer likes, but I try to give them a heads up and keep them informed with what's going on. And, as somebody that also makes gear, it kind of bugs me when stuff's been out for a long time and I've gotten no word on something like that. But so I try to keep that stuff in mind too. But I feel that you do more of a service to the end user that's actually reading the review by, enacting certain things and using it to its full potential. And that's what I try to do.
Well, and like you said, over time, you're going to get more. Because I always think of the Maglite commercials where they run it over with a truck.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't really tell me anything about how the light functions and operates. Like, okay, it can get run over by a truck, but I don't know what that 1-to-1 is in my daily life. Is it durable? Sure, but I don't know what conditions that tests it under. So time will tell if that actually does something to it. So rather than just, you see videos of people like freezing things in ice and throwing things and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's cool for durability, but what does that do over the long term? And that doesn't necessarily mean if it survives through that it's not going to break later doing something else.
Yeah, and I think the true test is time and usage. I mean, that really is what it comes down to. And you want to replicate it, because granted, you want to make sure that things are done to it that will replicate daily use over a certain period of time, but you also don't want to have to do things that necessarily speed up that process either, because
you want to do it artificially.
Right. I feel like in artificial evaluation like that, you're losing something with that. But yeah, that would be my... Oh, then we talked about range stuff,
drills
right?
and things I was going to say.
Yeah, so when it comes to firearms gear, which I think is what he's hinting at, is like, how do we evaluate that when we go to the range? Like, I usually start out with some type of zero confirmation. I always like to make sure if I've got the opportunity to confirm zero, I always do that.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to red dot stuff, because I'm actually kind of working through a red dot evaluation type comparison between like a T1 and T2. I've been using them both for a long time, and I've recently gotten a T2, and I'm seeing what that's like, because I try to even... I go back and forth between zeros, and I try to have a 100-yard zero just because it's consistent with a lot of other stuff I shoot. Like, I'd be at the 100 anyway, zeroing in a precision rifle, so why not kind of do that to an AR? Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, honestly, you got to think about engagement distance, too. Right. So, I mean, that's the thing about ARs is I think they're more of a
and it's everybody's different.
Yeah.
I'm see, because I have a zero at 25.
Right.
And, like... It's just, and the only reason I do that is because most of my shooting's at like 25. Yeah. And so I just do
absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Right. And so like this is such a tough thing because it's so dependent. But like, I guess if I was going to say like just normal stuff, like especially if you're looking at a magazine, just do normal magazine things with it, eject it, let it hit the ground, that kind of stuff. If you're talking about evaluation.
Yeah. I mean, drills are always in there. I'll run, kind of some of my go-to stuff on the range is basically mag changes with equipment and things like that. I'll run specific drills that institute mag changes within them.
Yep.
I try to move with equipment and guns as much as I can.
Yeah.
I don't like being on, a static range where I have to stand still and I can't even do a mag change. Like, there are some ranges like that. So I try to avoid those as much as possible.
Yeah. If I have somebody else there with me, I love to load dummy rounds in amongst my magazines because you'll get that
drills,
and you'll get that telltale dip when you are, pulling too early. But
yeah, that's great to do too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't say there's actually necessarily a formula. It's just kind of it's situationally dependent, and it's also dependent on what I'm evaluating at the time. So.
I think the worst thing people do on the range is when a gun does malfunction, their first instinct is to set it down and then back up and examine what happened to it rather than like
perform a malfunction drill
and
keep
like
firing. Yep.
Real world just gave you an opportunity and like you just set it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that too.
Okay, so there's a software question. This guy asks, Zach on Facebook says, do you have a particular system or app you use to track expiration dates? Specifically, I'm looking at tracking things like medications in a first aid kit and food items, as these are packed away in my 24-hour pack currently. I'm looking at either just putting alerts on my Google Calendar for when things expire, but I figured you might have a better method. This would be just as applicable for car emergency kits, get home, or bug out bags, or any other bags or kits people keep packed and ready to go.
Yeah, so the thing that I do is I use OmniFocus extensively. And what I like to do is I like to set defer dates too. So in OmniFocus, I have the ability to set a list of things that I have that are expirable in something like a 24-hour bag. And then I use defer dates to bring those to my attention within a time frame. The reason I don't like calendar alerts and things like that is because it alerts you on one day. So something pops up, you get a notification, hey, replace the AA batteries in this flashlight in your 24-hour bag. And I'm like, okay, check, I can do that. And I've done that for a long period of time before I kind of came to my current system. And what I would find is that I would write that down somewhere and have that as a 2, and then I can't get to this. Like I don't have double A's. I can't get to the store. Like it just becomes something that gets lost in the abyss, and I forget about it, and nothing ever happens to it because it's low on the priority list sometimes.
Right.
Like making sure expiration things are up to date in something that you don't use anyway is probably low on most people's priority list. So
Right.
I like to use that method in OmniFocus, which is a program that's available for Macs. It follows the GTD principles, which we talked about in a past episode. But what I like about that is I can have a list, and I can have the reminders to do something like that only appear as something that's coming up within a certain window. So meaning, let's say I want to give myself a week to replace those AA batteries because I know me, and I know
exactly.
I know that I'm not going to get a calendar alert
Yeah.
and just go immediately replace those. I'll probably take my time and I'll get around to it. So what I like to do is I'll defer that until the week that I need to get it done. So maybe on like a Friday afternoon, the defer notification will pop up. It's like, hey, this is something that's coming up. So I'll start to see it. And I have probably a week before it's actually due. So the due date would be like a week from then. So maybe by Sunday of that next week is when it's actually due. So that whole week I'll see it. I'll kind of have it in my subconscious that I need to actively do that. And then I'll actually have a hard deadline of when I need to get it done. So if it comes due, like if I actually get to the specific due date, I try to treat due dates and deadlines as true due dates and deadlines, and means I have to get it done. I, though, prefer to give myself kind of a reminder window so that I can kind of get it done before that's
versus
actually
due.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and that's helpful too because you don't have a due date should have importance and weight behind it, and a lot of that stuff like. Is it super important that it takes place at the beginning of the week? No. So you give yourself that week to.
Yeah.
The other thing I've started doing is I can plan better for like, I'll defer it to like a Saturday morning because I'll have the time to sit down and if I need to order the batteries, I'll order them or anything. And it's very convenient to like, oh, hey, that's a great time to remind myself is when I'm able to do something about it rather than like Monday morning at work and you're like, oh, crap, I don't have batteries right now. And then you're more likely to like, we'll just push it off.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you have a day that you know you have each week that you can take care of stuff like that, you can defer it for it to pop on your radar at that moment when you know you'll be sitting down and going through things like that, and you can kind of
super
convenient that way. Yeah, but no, I think due dates are not necessarily due dates, but expiration dates are something that I try to stay on top of religiously.
Yeah.
Like it's just it has to get done or it's never going to get done, and I'm a big advocate of having some type of reminder system in place to do that.
Absolutely. Okay, so next question comes from Travis on Facebook. We're back to guns. What is your opinion on red dot magnification? Do you run any on your ARs? Can you recommend one for an EOTech XPS 2.0 or go for a scope?
First of all, stop using EOTechs. Just get rid of them. They have a replace.
They'll buy them back.
They'll buy them back from you. EOTech has had a huge problem with holding zero,
just shadiness in general.
Yeah. Dump
cool.
the EOTech. But if I was going to recommend a magnification for an aim point, I would just recommend one of their 3X magnifiers if you really wanted to look at magnification on those. In my opinion, this kind of goes back to what we talked about before. I view the AR more as a short-range weapon system. I'm most likely not going to try to engage anything out. I mean, honestly, and this is purely my opinion. I know many people will disagree with this. But I prefer not to shoot ARs out past 100 yards. Like I would hope that I never have to do that.
Right.
And pistol distance is even shorter than that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I'm shooting something out past 100,
you stop making the case for self-defense past 100 yards.
Well, not only and you could. I mean, it applies to hunting too.
Well,
like
sure.
if I was going to go hunt hogs or something,
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily take my precision rifle. Right. I might.
Yeah.
But it really depends on the engagement distance. Like, I would try to walk up on a herd of hogs under night vision or something at a distance under 100 yards anyway. So I just don't foresee myself in that situation where I'm engaging stuff with an AR out past 100. Is it possible?
Sure.
Absolutely. Would I have a 3X magnifier for cases like that? Yes, I would.
Well, and so I bought one from Vortex.
Yeah, what do you a Vortex
so
magnifier?
So I have an Aimpoint Pro, which has a 4 MOA reticle.
Okay.
And that's really important because when you put a magnifier on it and you go to 200, you are now looking at a 4 MOA dot, which at 200 yards is massive. So like when you're looking through the magnifier, first of all, when you're looking through just the red dot at like 200,
that's a good point. So
you can
you're
barely
saying,
see the target.
So you're saying that it's magnifying the dot size as well.
So your dot is huge.
Yeah.
And yes, you can see the target's surroundings better, but as far as the target at 200 yards, it's eclipsed by your dot.
And see, I don't have much experience with the magnifier because I don't use them.
Right.
So
it's great. I like it. Looks cool, you know. That's one of those things, but like when it came to using it, I've started to realize it's not worth it. And now if I were to go with like the T1 or the T2, which has like a 2 MOA, maybe I would see a different size dot or something, but it hasn't ever been one of those things that it doesn't function as well as a scope, and it doesn't stay out of the way enough. Because the one issue you run into is when it's flipped to the side and you have the gun cheeked, you're losing a large amount of peripheral vision because this optic is just sitting in your field of view. So I flip mine off to the right, but still, when the gun's up, if you're searching, you can't see.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've thought about on this one particular 16-inch gun I have going with like just a 1x6 scope to get the magnification, because 6-time magnification,
like a red dot scope or something.
Well, just like a standard reticle.
I forget what a lot of the guys use those Schmidt and Benders, and I can't remember the nomenclature on them.
Yeah.
The actual name of the Schmidt and Bender, but it's a red dot.
That'd
basically,
be good.
But it's a magnified.
Oh, I like
red
that.
dot. So
the other thing I thought about was running an offset set of sights or something like that on a scoped rifle. If you wanted to do a dedicated scope, but you still wanted to do something close, you could do something like that. But yeah, I mean, as far as magnifiers, I bought one thinking like, oh, this will be so great, and it ended up not working super great. If you're engaging at long distances, very often you'd be better off getting glass.
And that's honestly somewhere that I would love to have more experience with, but I don't. Like I'm pretty opposite ends of the spectrum. Like there's no middle ground there, and what I refer to as middle ground is like a precision gas gun. I don't have one of those. I have a 5.56 and 300.
Yep.
They've either got a T1 or a T2 on them, short range built weapon system.
Yep.
And then I've got a pistol, I've got ARs like that, and then I've got the full on precision rifle that I can hit something at 1,300 yards with or something like that. So I don't have a middle ground type weapon system. I'd love to do that eventually.
Yeah.
And I would probably look for a dedicated red dot scope at that point to put on a platform like that.
Yeah.
If I was going to, I'd probably get an 18-inch barrel on an AR and, set it up just for that.
When you don't care about it being heavy.
Exactly. Exactly. So, or like a OBR or something like that.
Yeah.
Like a LaRue or something in that.
Well, that's a good point, too, whenever you talk about putting a magnifier on something like an SBR, especially with 5.56. At a 10.5-inch barrel, your engagement distances are much shorter.
Absolutely.
Because I think from 20-inch down to 10.5, it's like half the velocity of the round.
You're losing a lot of velocity with shorter barrels,
that's
too.
Nuts.
So, yeah, it really depends on what your situation is and what your engagement distance is.
Yep. Okay, so back to software. Okay. What type of software do you recommend? Oh, this is Gray from Twitter.
Okay.
He's hit us up twice on this. So
it means we really need to answer this question.
I combined both of his questions. What type of software do you recommend for financial monitoring for personal banking? I have business software, but need a home budget / analysis solution.
So what I migrated to a long time, I used to use Quicken, like way back in the day. I'm talking like 20 years ago. I used to run Quicken program, and I would literally balance my account down to the penny every week. I would balance it, and I did that for a super long time. So what I would do, and I'm super anal retentive about a lot of stuff I do in life, and financial stuff is one of those. Like I do the finances in the house.
Yeah.
I keep track of all that stuff.
Yep.
Kelly does it at work. I do it at home, so it kind of balances well.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, and she uses QuickBooks at work to do all that stuff. And I use Mint now to do a lot of that. But I've had a lot of problems with Mint, so I was going to kind of go through the story of how I arrived at that. So Quicken, what I used to do, like I said, I would balance everything to the T, balance my checkbook, make sure everything matched within my online banking stuff. And I used to be super anal retentive about that because I would always want to catch if my card was compromised or something was being used without my permission, or where did that charge come from. I still do that. I know what every transaction is, even if Kelly makes something on her card or something like that. I'm always, if I don't know, I ask.
Yeah.
I don't ever like to assume as like, oh, that's something Kelly bought. I don't really care about that.
You never know.
I like to know because I want to be on the lookout for stuff like that. And funny enough, I actually caught something in the last couple of months, and there's been a period of time, I'd say years have gone by without me catching anything.
Sure.
And only recently, because of kind of what I do, did I catch things like that. So I got tired of doing as much as I was doing before. I mean, I did it for years, and it's only been in the last maybe 4 or 5 years that I've moved over to Mint, and I've dropped, well, I dropped Quicken, I think even longer than that. But anyway, I got tired of doing the built-in software. I wanted something online.
Yeah.
Very hesitant to move into the online world, especially with financial stuff. But, you know, banking's online now.
Right.
I figure...
all the stuff's there.
Yeah, I figure... and Mint's more of an aggregator, too. So this program is kind of doing what Quicken is able to do, but you can do budget analysis stuff on Mint, too, which I really like.
Nice.
So I can set up how much things are going to cost every month, and I can kind of look at budget on a grand scheme. It's super searchable.
Yeah.
I can find things easily, which is what I like about it too. And it pulls in an aggregation from every financial institution I have. So there's stuff from our savings that are in there, so investments. And it's not pulling in account numbers and stuff like that. It's pulling in the data.
Just the
so
transactions.
you give it access to that account, and then it pulls in your transactions, and you can, once you've built a history within the software, then you kind of get a good idea of like what's going on.
That's nice.
Historically with your accounts too, which is good. So I use that, and I don't do anything more than just use it as a reference point. So I'll go to my online institution for that particular account. I'll look at the transactions. I'll compare them to what Mint has pulled in. I'll make sure they're the same. I'll change names that were like a default name that was brought in from an account, and I make notes. So like I say, this is for this type of thing. So and I categorize them. That's what Mint's great at too. So I categorize the transactions, and after a period of time, like I was talking about historically, you build, you know, where your where your money goes. You can say, okay, well, how much did I spend on entertainment this month? Or
exactly.
And then you can use that with the budget software that Mint has too to kind of do that with.
That's awesome.
That's kind of where I'm at now.
Nice.
I don't know if it's the easiest thing to do. I don't know if it's the best thing to do, but it's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I mean, if you're getting into like budgeting type stuff, I don't ever think it's going to be easy, because the easiest thing to do is to not look at it at all, and then check your bank account on Saturday morning and go, oh man, whew, that hurt.
Yeah.
Something I've been using for like a year and a half now. It's very similar to Mint. It is called YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget.
Interesting.
And what it does is, its core fundamentals is that every dollar that you make has a job. And that job could be paying for an oil change, or it could be going into your savings, but it has a job. So there's never a dollar that's just like, oh, it's just going to disappear. So what YNAB forces you to do is list out every single category that you're going to spend for the month. So one of the things that really kind of changed the way I viewed it was, eventually, like I bought a new vehicle in 2015, and eventually it's going to need new tires. And so a section of the money that I get every pay period goes to have a job for getting me new tires. That way in 5 years or 4 years, whenever you need tires, the money is there, and all of the dollars have been assigned to that. So
that's very interesting.
It kind of forces you to look at stuff on a grand scale. And if you go over, it'll show you a red negative amount that says, hey, you got to come up with this money from somewhere else. So it's super hands-on. So if you're not looking for like a very categorized thing.
Well, so let me ask you this. So when it's allocating the funds on a monthly basis or weekly paycheck basis to eventually pay for those tires, where is that money going? Is it just kind of disappearing digitally?
It's in one of the accounts that you have. So for me...
So you're actually transferring money based on this app?
Yeah. Well, the app doesn't do it. You have to do it through your bank.
Okay.
Which I find a little safer. But basically what it ends up being is that money sits in the highest interest-bearing account because it just makes sense. But
Which is what, a savings account that earns like 0.0012?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing. But what I've been guilty of in the past is I'll look at the account and I'll be like, oh, damn, I got a bunch of money in there. But you don't, because it's all allocated for something. And so you end up spending your electric bill's money on something else. So this just gives you an ability to look at your account on a whole and understand that everything has a job this month. So like you said, entertainment. Hey, next month we want to buy a TV or something. Okay, just fit that that in. So it's been super helpful. They also have a huge community behind it. And so if you have questions about
That's cool.
balancing and things like that, they're really responsive. But
one thing that I've been kind of really forcing myself to do for probably the past, and it's really paid off too. This is probably for the past 10, 12 years or so. Ever since Kelly and I got our first house, I have always I've always made direct payments to principal on things like that. So I always use the whole pay yourself first model.
Yeah.
So meaning I deposit I automatically put stuff into savings every month.
Yep.
Based on just expectations that I have from leftover budget money. So that stuff disappears before I even see it.
Yep.
And I make sure of that.
You just get used to it.
And then I also have extra money going towards principal in our mortgage so that money disappears before I even have a chance to do anything with it. So basically, I've set that up through my mortgage company to basically make an extra payment every year.
Oh, that's awesome.
For our mortgage. So
that speeds it up.
Meaning, it's like maybe, I don't know. In our old house, I knew exactly what it was. It was like $50, $60 a month. And by the time the year went by, I had an extra payment paid directly to principal. And it helped us pay down our house faster.
Yeah.
When we moved, we were able to have more equity because of that. So
Absolutely.
It just made a lot of sense. So as if to kind of reinforce the fact that I pay myself first.
Right.
So that's what I use automatic drafts from my bank for stuff like that. They transfer into savings.
Yep.
I pay bills with online bill pay all the time, and it's seamless. That's another thing I'd like to get into, too, that I think is important, is that I've set everything up automatically.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely everything.
Yep.
There's nothing that happens, like I don't get a bill in the mail. I'm like, oh, crap, I need to cut a check. Right. I don't ever do that crap. It's automatically made through either a bank draft, an automatic check that gets cut from my bank because I know the amount, that type of thing. So,
and I review those bills as they come in, and if I need to dispute it, I'll dispute it.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you've already paid it; you can still dispute things. So
so I have an Evernote doc that has every single bill that I have during the month.
Oh, that's great.
And every time I get the new bill in, I change that number of like what this month's bill is going to be. And it's a manual process, but I like it because it forces me to interact with that information.
Yeah.
And each time that amount clears, I go and put a little check mark next to it.
Yep.
And then the next month rolls around, I adjust all my numbers back, put the new due date, and undo the check mark. So I have kind of a running tab of what still is going to come out of my account during this month. So
I think the unwillingness that a lot of people have to sit down and do that comes from it's not necessarily that it's hard. It's because you don't want to face the truth of like, I shouldn't have spent what I spent on this. And so you kind of put it off and put it off and put it off. And then finally it's like, you're going to have to face the music someday. Yeah. Like you might as well sit down and do it.
What's funny about that is my dad's an artist. He's a graphic designer. And I grew up with him taking this huge piece of paper. Like he had this big roll of paper. So he would take a huge piece of paper and he would draw this graph out for his budget.
So like he made his own Excel.
He made his own Excel document
like
every
a
month.
Spreadsheet, literally.
So,
I like that.
It was funny.
That's awesome.
Like whatever I've done financially, I'm like completely the opposite of my dad. So I don't know if that's a thing with parents, but
I think so too. Anyway. I am too. Okay, so our last question comes from Nuttinfuddy556 on YouTube.
Great username.
And he says, "I notice you use tap water for making coffee. Why is that?" Well, it's because that's what we have.
Yeah, we don't have filtered water to make coffee. So.
I mean, we have a drip pot for coffee, so it has a filter in it. We change the filter, but
at home I have a fancy espresso machine that's got a filter built in.
Oh yeah, so the filtration system.
It actually tells you not to use distilled or filtered water when you put water into the machine too. It's kind of interesting.
It'd be like too filtered of water.
Super filtered. Don't drink it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that pretty much wraps up our questions, right?
Yep.
I thought that was cool. I think we answered some really cool stuff.
Sure.
We definitely went all over the board. We got everything from firearms to financial software. So, so anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. As always, if you have questions, we have now gotten to the questions. So
keep them coming.
Use the # Gear Tasting on any social media network, and we will get them answered here on Gear Tasting Radio. And don't forget, if you're enjoying Gear Tasting Radio, check us out on iTunes, and please drop us a rating or a review, and please subscribe if you're enjoying what we're doing. And check us out every Tuesday.